What is Gandhi's theme song?
There was a fellowship theme. How did the fellowship theme go?
Anybody know the tune, the Fellowship tune?
Hey, Andrew, Andrew, what was the fellowship theme? You should be humming that to yourself as you walk in here.
To the Bridge of Cosset.
There have been a few times in the past decades where film music has really broken through into the popular consciousness. And I think Howard Shore's work on the Middle-earth films is a very rare and very special thing.
Throughout the Middle-earth series, beginning with The Lord of the Rings and now continuing into The Hobbit, Howard Shore's score sort of hit the zeitgeist at the right time. It's emotional.
They will look for his coming from the White Tower, but he will not return.
The last of our kin.
It's dramatic.
Me.
And it's got a lot of heart. And I think will continue to be some of the best known scores in cinema going forward for decades.
Setting out to create The Hobbit, we wanted to bring this world into the world that we had already established with Lord of the Rings.
The first Hobbit movie, An Unexpected Journey, covered a lot of very familiar territory with Hobbiton and the Hobbits and the Ring and Gollum and Rivendell, which all required us to reprise themes. I mean, we didn't want to write a new Rivendell theme.
It was a great score, but the most exciting thing really about the second movie is that, you know, there was hardly any old themes in it.
Our journey goes into uncharted new territory.
And for the first time in the Hobbit trilogy, Howard was able to write a brand new score from start to finish. This is the Howard Shore score that I was certainly waiting for.
Tolkien's writing is very complex, probably the most complex fantasy world ever created. It filled up with so many ideas of places and cultures. So you needed all of these themes for clarity, for storytelling.
A very big component of Howard's score is the use of the themes to anchor you and remind you of a character and where you are in the story.
I think the score for film 2 has more new themes than we've had in a single film before, even in the original trilogy. Howard wrote 19 themes, and all of those were approved by Peter before he was scoring anything to picture.
Should we orchestrate this? Because I think it's good to go. The way that we work with Howard is that he starts to generate new themes. If we want a new theme, a new character, you know, we're going to a new place. He generates those themes without any picture. He literally writes a 1.5 minute synth mock-up. Once that theme exists and everybody's happy with it, then it's so easy to then take that theme and apply it to the different scenes that you want to use it.
Usually I spend a few months just writing the thematic ideas. And I start with Tolkien's writings. The words, to me, always inherently have everything I need to get started.
The lost path. No other idea would come into Bilbo's tired head. He just sat, staring in front of him at the endless trees.
And here we have three really good screenwriters, so you take away a lot from the screenplay.
If this is to end in fire, then we will all burn together.
Looking at beautiful conceptual drawings of Alan Lee and John Howe is a great source of inspiration. And I like to visit the set. Seeing the actual creations of Richard Taylor and Weta Workshop. Seeing the actual designs brought to life in the studio. See the director in action.
So Steve, you've got to know better, and you have to sort of get across to here.
Peter describing an image in the green screen can be enlightening.
He spins around on you, and
This huge big body of the dragon kind of slithering its way between one wall and the other.
But having said all that, sometimes I like to just dream of it on my own. It's a little bit like Oz, you know, you don't want to take a peek behind the curtain and see how everything's being done. You want to stay in the magic of it. I like to write the themes first and then go into the scoring process, so the themes and the motifs are fully formed.
In the past with these films, what has happened is that Howard would write the music, he orchestrates the music, delivers the final scores to the players, and is up there conducting the LPO in London.
Touch it once and then let it decay.
on The Lord of the Rings, we were able to go to London from New Zealand and go to Abbey Road. You know, I used to sit in on every single music recording session.
He would spend the entire scoring time in London so that he could be on the stage helping shape the performance of the music.
I just wondered if there was any way the scene could start after the shot of Gollum when we're back on Frodo again, because it goes Frodo, Gollum, Frodo.
We thought we were going to be able to go to London when we did the first Hobbit movie.
Yeah, Mr. Gandalf, can't you do something about this deluge?
But we just couldn't figure out how to leave the country for 6 weeks. The post-production in New Zealand was so intense that we just couldn't get there.
I think we want to lower everything for the Goblin King's line so it really stands out.
Peter's a guide for not just music, but for everything.
Do you want one shot of the dwarves running towards us?
Any process that Peter Jackson would be away from, technical or creative decisions.
That last wag springs off a bit lightweight, that one there.
Those processes would suffer.
It would be good if it's a violent shot.
Well, the same thing happened for us because he wasn't able to come to London.
And it was a big struggle because it meant that he wasn't able to help in shaping the score in the way he had on the original trilogy.
So getting into film 2, we now knew that we're not going to get Peter to come to London. So how do we do it? How do we take the mountain to Mohammed?
So this time on the Desolation of Shmaug, we brought the scoring to New Zealand. We did that in the Wellington Town Hall with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra.
We also built a system and a team so that Howard could stay in New York, where he lives and works, and really focus on the one thing that nobody else can do, and that is compose. Breaking the task down so that James Sizemore and Conrad Pope would do the orchestrations.
Howard is usually composing 2 minutes of new music each day, and we develop the sounds and textures under his supervision.
It's quite a team effort, really. So it kind of worked like that from me to James to Conrad, and then Conrad conducting.
And what an orchestrator can do is take a composer's shorthand and help him determine the part each instrument in the ensemble will play. This is a massive task because each bar is so contained with so much information of dynamics, how loud you play, how long you play, whether or not it's staccato, marcato, it's all these things that are just overwhelming, the amount of information. And that's one bar. And these pieces of music that Howard has written will have 400 bars in them.
This is an example of one violin part from one cue we prepared for the Hobbit film.
We don't get to see the parts ahead of time. We arrive and it's just on our music stand.
This is what we get, and then we start reading, and you know, sometimes it's a bit busier, but that's just what we do.
There's no real rehearsal. We just come in and we do our job, which is to play everything perfectly first time.
Here we go. 4 into 95. Recording.
Here lies our path through Mirkwood.
In Mirkwood, it's a forest that's kind of hallucinogenic almost. You get lost in this tangle of trees and fungus. And the music can actually get inside the heads of the characters more effectively than just about anything.
Mirkwood definitely had a clear, identifiable tune to it.
It's a very simple, straightforward line that tends to get lost in the texture, but there's this recurring idea. And then they wander off the path, and they lose that theme, and they lose that clarity, and everything becomes jumbled and hypnotic.
That music was made to make you feel ill. To make you feel a bit woozy.
Howard has a very impressive ability to really shape the sound using some aleatoric methods in the music.
Aleatoric, in a very rough sense, boils down to there being some improvised element of the music that creates this very bizarre but beautiful texture.
We owe a great debt to the composers of the 50s, the Polish avant-garde, really, which is where it really became a more well-known technique.
Modern composers like Penderecki that really stress that type of writing.
Essentially, the players have a box with some notes in it. They can play any of those notes in any order, in any rhythm they want. And they don't have to play them all. They can pick a few, they can pick one. But the main thing is to get some randomness in it.
It's almost like a scene from Dante's Hell. You could actually hear the tormenting of the various souls, that human element that we bring to it.
A lot of the work to create the sense of what a trippy kind of experience that the dwarves are going through was obviously going to be done through sound.
Just do like various strokes or whatever you do on the water foam, whatever it is you do to that thing.
We wanted to invoke some sound of things falling off the trees and things slipping out of your mind.
The orchestra could just come up with some, well, not sound effects, but almost like musical sound effects.
Stringed instruments being played in ways they shouldn't be played. A whole lot of different strange percussion sound, bowed cymbals.
The name for this is random stuff.
And fuse it together into what is Mirkwood.
Further on a Mirkwood is the Woodland Realm, which is the elvish kingdom of Thranduil.
When the woodland elves are introduced, there has to be a little bit of cohesiveness and continuity to tie them together with all the other elf cultures. We already have the Lothlorien elves, we have the Rivendell elves.
Rivendell has had its own structure, its own harmonic language. It was based around a much more formal type of system of harmony.
And then you move over to Lothlorien, which sounds slightly Arabic, if you will. But now you have this whole new elf culture, which has their own heritage behind it.
When you get to the woodland realm, things start to get a little bit more complex in terms of, are these friends, are these foes?
I offer you my help.
They're sort of both light and dark at the same time, and I think the theme actually does represent that and show that.
I do not think you would allow your son to pledge himself to a lowly sylvan elf.
Tauriel is one of the few elf characters to have her own theme.
Where other elf royalty didn't have thematic music specifically created for them, like Elrond, Galadriel. They have hints of their culture connected to them. But Tauriel has her own motifs.
Her theme sort of draws on a little figure that you often hear at the end of the theme for the Woodland Realm. So that is very similar to the same idea.
Music describes her movement and how fluid it was.
One of my favorite musical themes in these films so far is Kili and Tauriel's theme. It's absolutely beautiful.
This theme was based on the concept of duality. In the beginning, you have a duet for flute and oboe. You know, two different voices conversing.
She worries. She thinks I'm reckless.
Are you?
Because you basically have a relationship theme here that's between two cultures that don't traditionally go together.
This connection that forms between the two of them, it's doomed from the beginning, but it's no less beautiful for being doomed. One of the favorite things that I get to do working on these films is to work with Howard Shore, writing lyrics for Howard when he needs choir.
It is Merith and Gilith, the feast of starlight. All light is sacred to the Eldar, but wood elves love best the light of the stars.
When she speaks about how elves love all light, above all else they love starlight, and the notion that this young sylvan elf, whose world has probably been confined by this dark woodland, and who has never really ever ventured out into the world, has yet in a way spiritually gone beyond the confines of the world and walked, as she says,
I have walked there sometimes, beyond the forest and up into the night.
That became the theme of the song, and then we gave it to David Salo, who does all our translations.
The chorus is two different languages. You have an Elvish language, and you have Húsdúl, the Dwarvish language, kind of going back and forth, call and response.
This is a soprano with the London Voices, Grace, who sang that. I'd have to say one of the best sopranos I've ever heard. She did an amazing, amazing job.
And then by the time we actually hear that Tauriel and Kili theme develop when Toriel heals Keeley at the end of the film, it's so much more powerful because it's kind of had the chance to grow and mature along with those characters.
It's like a fragile thing, the way they connect. And I think Howard just perfectly captured that with the theme that he wrote.
At its heart, you're using themic material that is telling the story.
Do you think she could have loved me?
The music is really an emotional guide, and Howard's scores have been a big part of the success and the connection that the audience has with these films. The journey on the Hobbit's score has been different for a number of reasons, and for film 2, we knew we were not going to get Peter to come to London. So we decided that we would launch a scoring adventure, if you will, in Wellington Town Hall.
Now, this building is exactly 100 years old, and it's an auditorium built before anybody recorded sound. It's built for live performance, and as such, the acoustics are incredibly good.
Soon after it was opened, it was rated as one of the top 10 auditoriums in the world. The town hall hosted Queen Elizabeth II on her inauguration tour when she first visited New Zealand. Later in its history, the first time New Zealanders got to hear the Beatles live in concert was at the Wellington Town Hall in 1964.
The acoustics in the town hall are quite impressive. But the problem is it's not a dedicated recording facility. And I was very nervous about that because there's a lot of equipment that we need in order to do this properly.
Today is day one of our pack-in for recording into the town hall. We're still kind of working out what needs to go where and how we're going to have it, because essentially we're building a studio inside this big, beautiful building. Hopefully, in a few days, we would have totally worked it out.
Look at all this gear behind over here. The town hall has got a fantastic acoustic, and so we want to be able to capture the sound of the orchestra in the room. But the way that we are setting it up is really studio quality, so we're hoping to get the best of both worlds.
The floor layout of the town hall was a similar space to Abbey Road in London. Before he came out here, Pete measured everything out at Abbey Road and then overlaid that orchestra setup into the CAD drawings that the NZSO had sent us for the town hall. And then that became essentially this duplicate setup of what he had done in Studio One at Abbey Road.
Pete Cobbin basically set it up with an array of incredible old microphones, some of them 50 or 60 years old.
We've got some classic M50 Neumann microphones, and they're a good 60 years old, and they've got a fantastic warm coloration.
He's got microphones in all sorts of interesting little places. Recording not just the orchestra, he's recording like the reverb and the echo and the decay that a place like this actually gives you.
You can just hear, if you think of the sound going up to the ceiling and then back down, you can write bigger music, more epic music, more music like Richard Strauss, because this hall can be filled with immense sound.
We actually recorded a large section of the Fellowship of the Ring score here back in 2001 with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra.
It's just an honor to be working with you. We started with the New Zealand Symphony on the Mines of Moria. They were the first orchestra that recorded music for Lord of the Rings. It was a piece that we took to Cannes. It was kind of a teaser reel kind of thing.
Greetings from New Zealand. I'd like to introduce you to my friend and passenger, Peter Jackson.
Thank you, Gandalf. Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all to the special screening of some footage from the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
New Line wanted to roll out Fellowship of the Ring in a big way at the Cannes Film Festival in May of 2001, and it was decided that they would show an entire sequence for the film.
Frodo. Orcs.
We were a long way from doing any music scoring, but we needed to do this section.
So they brought Howard down there, and this is why the films were still very much in production. So everything sort of needed to be down in New Zealand. There was no time for anyone to go anywhere else.
Actually, tomorrow I go out and shoot some more of the film. So it's a kind of interesting place to be at the moment. You don't know whether you're Arthur or Martha.
The Cannes Film Festival presentation was critical. There was no guarantee that this series was going to be a success. And if it hadn't been, even though we shot all 3 films, we would have downscaled our post-production efforts on film 2 and 3. So there was a lot riding on it.
It was the proof of concept for the film, but it also was for the music. Howard wasn't known as someone that had tackled this sort of filmmaking before. So to be able to introduce that to the world, both cinematically and musically, it was just hugely important.
Hopefully they'll get some sort of idea of the sheer scope and depth and passion that we have for these movies.
Even just showing the 24 minutes that we showed after 4 years of work, it feels a bit like a premiere, and everybody has been so kind in comments of what they saw that I think it's a good cause for celebration, so we're very happy.
It played terrifically at Cannes, and we felt, okay, we've got a winner here. Now we just have to finish it.
It was before the actual score was due to be recorded in the UK, so we thought it might get replaced eventually before the film was finished, but it wasn't the case. The New Zealand Symphony Orchestra played so brilliantly, and this room sounded so fantastic that it was never replaced, and that's what you're hearing in the movie.
The 26 minutes that we recorded very much became the sound. And in a way, that kind of set the mood for that film and for pieces that came after it.
A number of the players had been with us when we did The Mines of Moria, so it was a little bit of a homecoming.
Yeah, I was part of the first Lord of the Rings movie. Of course, I was a bit younger, like we all were, but it was really exciting, something I had never done before.
To be involved in such a huge film score, Oscar-winning score, I was just having the best time of my life with that.
To now go full circle after so many years and be back playing his music with another wonderful conductor, Conrad Pope, it's a great combination.
So, welcome back.
This is a huge deal for the Interdisso. Obviously, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit is presenting New Zealand to the rest of the world. I mean, this is Middle-earth. We've been wanting to do this recording for a very long time. So we're very glad it's gone there and back again. It's now back in New Zealand.
The New Zealand Orchestra was truly impressive, and I gotta say, the sound that came out of there was really amazing.
I always thought it'd be great to be able to bring that home and let them get their teeth around an entire score this time rather than just a 20-minute section.
It's really different recording to performing. Part of the difference is that in a recording, it goes on for a whole day. So a concert would never go on for a whole day. You have to keep your energy strong and concentrated throughout many more hours.
I find this, in a way, more challenging and more stimulating than playing a Bruckner symphony.
It is very different to what we normally would do in a symphony concert, for example. We need to be directed by the conductor, in this case, conductor and orchestrator.
Just going to play this and try to catch the various tempo changes with the click. Then we'll come back and dissect it.
Conrad Pope is pretty much the top orchestrator in town, and he brings such a kind of an infectious joy.
He's so sort of laid back and chilled out. He sort of doesn't at all suit the stereotype of a conductor.
And we're locking the doors.
A good conductor is not someone who makes a performance. A good conductor is someone who actually releases a performance. Not dictate it, not command it, perhaps guide it, but know that his real role is to honor their artistry and to make it possible for all the instrumentalists here to give their best.
What is this place? This Master Buggins is the world of men.
The Lake Town theme was about this town that once had glory. Now it's faded into the past because of its trials and tribulations with a dragon.
We wanted to base the Lake Town theme almost like a smuggler's shanty town, something like out of, England in the 1700s at the Cornwall coast.
17th century pirates, smugglers. It has that feeling to me of this folk piece that may have been 100 or a couple hundred years old.
Folk songs tend to have that simple, repetitive structure. It has that dun, da, da, dun, da, da, da. It almost felt like a work song.
It probably relates more to Rohan in the folk aspect of it. But Rohan had the hardanger. It had this northern European sound. Whereas Lake Town does feel more like England.
Get me a brandy.
The mayor and his lackey really have this sort of tainted air of decay and corruption.
The master of Lake Town has got this little theme which is played on a clavichord.
Howard asked for clavichord, and but in the demo he sent it was a harpsichord sample. Pete really liked the sound of the demo, and I was really concerned that we would go and record the clavichord, and Pete would be wondering what it was and what happened to the sound in the demo that he had really liked.
They're both keyboard instruments with metal strings inside. The clavichord is struck with little metal blades, which gives it a sort of dingier tone. Whereas a harpsichord plucks its strings as it's played, which gives it a nice, brilliant type of sound.
So we had to decide, would we do a harpsichord or a clavichord? So we decided to get both down to the town hall and try them.
When we actually came around to review it for Pete, Fran actually immediately said, well, it's obvious which one we have to go to. And to us, it was all obvious, but we weren't sure whether her obvious was the same that was obvious to us. And then there was this pause. It was almost deliberate, I think, that she just waited like 10 seconds or so before she actually said which one, but it was the clavichord.
I think we can go to the next spot, 41.
The score that we receive at the beginning of each session, it's really just the starting point for the music that we'll be recording that day. There are so many changes that are made.
I find myself at a disadvantage when I'm sitting in the room trying to give notes. Don't know anything about bars and octaves and semitones, and it's all kind of Latin nonsense to me, really, but I listen to the music and I imagine dramatically, you know, how it's got to work within the framework of the film.
Any notes?
Yeah, I had a couple of little notes there, just a couple of small ones. I just wondered if the very first notes are a bit too, I don't know, sort of lacking tension or lacking an edge.
When it comes to music, he doesn't have the musical terminology, but if he explains the story and you understand what he's trying to do with the story, that pretty much explains everything that needs to happen from a music perspective.
I will translate what the director says and know immediately, because of my orchestrational skills, this, and this. Let's try it.
Flutes, all of you take piccolos. With your piccolos and stuff, just do rips up to the highest possible note.
Let's try that, yeah.
Let's see if this works.
Psycho, isn't it?
Is it a little too psycho?
Well, it's about as psycho as you can get.
Yeah.
Without being psycho.
It's the flutes is what's doing the psycho stuff.
I think that's a bit too. It's a wee bit too much, I think.
Hey, Conrad.
Mm.
We've gone too far with the flutes. I think what Pete's looking for is if we put the flutes back to what they have, and I don't know if we can have anything playing this part an octave up from what the top currently is.
If there are more complex changes to the music, we actually need to get new parts printed.
Vic, could you give the trumpets, basically the clarinet part, from bars 26 through 34?
At Conrad's request, he wanted to add the trumpets into a section of music that didn't have trumpets previously, and he wanted them to play what the clarinets were playing. So I'm creating a new part for the trumpets, and then I'll print it and pass it out to the players.
We could give a reasonably complex change and within a few minutes actually have new parts out to the players that the change affected.
It's amazing to me how Conrad's mind can perceive the colors he wants by subtracting instruments or adding instruments.
8 into 26, please.
And so those have to be done on the spot, and we were able to do that because of the artistry of the orchestra, their attentiveness, and their willingness to sort of play it by ear.
It's got much more of a kind of a peril to it, much more jeopardy to it, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine.
There'll just be a few notes in a minute, Conrad.
Sometimes things are happening in the control room that they're making film decisions that we're not party to, and we have to sit and wait until they're finished.
That can sometimes be a little alienating for an orchestra. So it's really important that the conductor is the link between what he knows he needs to deliver for the control room and the filmmakers and keeping the orchestra engaged.
Is this a Pro Tool thing?
Yep.
How much longer have we got? Because I can tell all my jokes.
You might have time for another joke.
My country, to join the musicians union, they don't ask you to play an instrument. They first say, "Can you tell time?" Though I did discover a new drink here that I've never heard of. Red Bull and vodka. It's called the Conductor. No.
With the jokes, not that I'm looking for a second career, because if I did, I'd definitely fail at that one. My goal is to keep everyone engaged.
So when we actually come back to them, they're all ready to go and they're focused.
So this viola player in the Boston Symphony couldn't stand Arthur Fiedler. Just hated him.
Here he comes.
Sometimes he kind of gets halfway through a joke and then the control room steps in and we don't get to hear the end of it.
So the Pops were playing this arrangement.
We're ready now, Conrad.
I think we got about 3 more words each time we tried to tell it. And finally, we got to the punchline.
First piece up after intermission, and it was going to be the Mexican hat dancer. So Fiedler walks out on stage, and he knows that one of the viola players that hated him had on a brimmed Mexican hat. And he looked at the guy and he said, "Take that off." The guy said, "No." He said, "I'm going to come down there and take it off you." Come ahead. And in mid-thing, Fiedler jumps off the podium because he just is so infuriated after about 32 bars and goes after the guy, and they start to wrestle, and the audience goes wild. They think, this is the best show ever.
So we're definitely ready now.
Okay. And hey, could we do that like in about 20 minutes? The orchestra's due a break.
Sure.
Yes, there you go. Thank you. And then after a 20-minute break, I came back, and I'd just gotten all these changes from Peter, and I had so much to dictate to the orchestra. And I came up and I raced up to the podium here and I had my head just buried. And so somebody said, "The violas have a question. The violas have a question." I go, fine. Violas have a question. And I looked up. Very good. We did a lot of very hard work, very tough work requiring a lot of concentration. But we sort of never lost sense of also just having a good time. Excellent. Suddenly, it's all been elevated in my mind. Are we just marking time till Pete gets here? Yes. Okay, we'll just try this and.
Peter's schedule is a complex tap dance of his time. Every day consists of a little bit of everything, from going to scoring sessions, to visual effects reviews, to recording ADR, to sound mixing.
I thought the sound of going in and out of the thing could be a little bit more accentuated.
Having a score right there in New Zealand, it was beneficial for all. Peter's time could be used wisely.
Yeah, I bet. He's all over the place. You know, he almost needs one of those segways to cruise around.
Of course, what always happens with the music recording is that it's at the most frantic time of the movie-making process. It's right in the middle of post-production.
And getting the fry pan, and then you go to the guy with the mop getting whacked.
So everything funnels together into this very compressed 6-8 week window.
That's the sort of water you want to go for because you believe that it's deep enough.
Pete, they're ready for you downstairs.
Okay.
I see his schedule, and I just think, well, I've got it easy. But he has a tremendous ability to be focused on whatever task is in front of him.
Even though I'm busy, I love being here. I love the music. Just having it playing while I'm dealing with all this stuff is actually a little different, which is nice. Bit of soft, gentle musical accompaniment.
Music is such a heartbeat, a sort of a pulse of the movie. I mean, visual effects, design, production, that's all okay, but I don't know what's more important than music in some respects. The Dwarven themes had to have a nobility, they had to have a sadness, they had to have a sense of a faded sort of empire.
It kind of takes back to what I had thought about and what I had created in Lord of the Rings for the Dwarf Kingdom.
Howard Shore created the sound of Dwarvish culture, the sound of ruined grandeur, something that was once beautiful and proud and great, but has sort of been worn away by the horrors that have befallen it. In The Hobbit, the House of Durin theme has a very similar feel to it.
It's interesting how, with the different dwarf themes, House of Durin has become so predominant, very important piece. And House of Durin kind of takes back to the history of the dwarves and their lineage. And Thorin's theme grew out of the House of Durin.
What the interesting thing is when you take that theme and you repurpose it in different ways.
With Thorin's theme, you begin with a scene that's really kind of before any of the quest has begun. You see Thorin and you hear this very shadowy version of his theme. It's not quite put together yet. The goals of that character are a little bit lost. So you see him go from discovering his quest to realizing his quest, and the music follows it.
And then, of course, we have the Erebor theme. You hear that piece and you know where you are.
And Erebor is where we get, of course, to meet a rather large dragon.
Smaug's theme had to accomplish a lot musically. I mean, this is a much more epic, very sinister, cunning, and powerful character.
And do you now? I think Smaug required a sound and a texture different from the rest of the film.
There's one Smaug melody that's very long, takes a long time to develop, and the other one can be done pretty quickly, just with a few notes. You can say Smaug pretty quick.
You have the basic form here. The ascending version is a little bit longer, but built on the same pitches.
I think that Smaug melody is too sort of comfortable sounding. Is there a way that we can just make it nastier?
You just want creepier?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the melody part. It's just a little too musical and too nice.
We wanted something that would play this sort of paranoid, psychotic feel.
And so rather than sort of bend the theme in a way, I thought, well, you know, what we should do is probably just do something that you never hear, that's very hard actually for them to do, which is various people doing their own interpretation and intonation.
Just all over the place. And ugly. Lots of pressure. Right near the bridge. Pretend you're taking an audition where you don't want the job.
And what they were all doing is they were all playing slightly detuned, but all differently.
Which is very hard because they've all learned to play in tune.
Wow.
Outstanding! Did you guys like
Conrad, that's wicked.
Smaug is somebody who literally is a psychopath. And music is a wonderful secret weapon. It's like the sort of Smaug melody you'd hear with a dentist trying to drill a root canal into your tooth sort of thing, just kind of, it's something that gets into your head, you know?
Watch it destroy him. Watch it corrupt his heart and drive him mad.
It wasn't too bad, was it?
And by the time we get the gamelan and everything else in here, it's going to be just unbelievable.
In Smog's theme, we use Eastern elements of the gamelan.
Gamelan's a family of instruments from Indonesia. It includes all sorts of different sounds, deep gongs, metallophones, xylophones, a lot of pitched metal instruments. It's very tied into all aspects of Indonesian culture. It was used for ceremonies, used for dances, used for puppet plays. And the legend behind it was that it was designed by this god that lived high up upon a mountain. So you have that idea of somebody up in their mountain using this sound to sort of relate to the other gods around.
You wanted to reveal Smog as a force from the East, something very exotic, and it was a way to bring in the Eastern culture into Smog.
There's a gamelan orchestra at the university, and I was charged with the task of going up to investigate, record some ideas, incorporate those colours and those textures with the conventional Western score.
The concept of the gamelan is the togetherness. We're playing it together.
We did a lot of things that could be used in film composition to make layers of texture and some things for the composer to use.
I mean, it's just an exotic sound. And so I would play around with different melodic parts that are tonally written in scales that evoke, pseudo-evoke the East, really.
And most of it is for the scene where Bilbo's going into the cave with all the coins and the gold and sneaking around.
I remember there were spots where we featured it. I just remember pushing up on the fader because we liked the sound. It's a good complement to a lot of the action. You'll hear little tingly, crazy sounds. They almost sound like the jewels, but they're not. They're percussive little hits that accent the stillness of that room and just the quietness.
What's that?
And all that blended together with the orchestra gets a really, really interesting colour.
While Smaug's theme dominates that last section of the picture, there is a battle going on with the dwarves and Smaug. But if you look at it from a purely musical aspect, there's a battle of themes.
Hello from New York. James and Howard here.
Hi. And suddenly these guys drop buckets on his head. So now Smaug is buying them time, and now the gold starts to go down this channel. So maybe we're almost playing Thorin's plan now. And it lifts, and now Smaug's coming at him.
The tide turns, it's going with our guys. Now it's going against our guys. It's like watching a high-speed tennis match.
From a filmmaking point of view, there's so much subtle stuff that you can do that unconsciously kind of supports the story that you're telling. And now this is the culmination of Thorin's plan. When the statue melts, it's a triumphant moment for Thorin, and that theme's playing. For a moment, we think that Smaug is gone. And suddenly, Smaug bursts out of the gold. And then it changes into Smaug's theme.
music dominates right to the very end, and you're left with a sense of, it seems like Smaug's victorious.
We're here on our last day of scoring, and we're actually recording a section of the film right now that isn't really finished. So it's very hard because we're trying to record a piece of music for a section of film that doesn't exist, and we have kind of a guide of it.
There will be visual effects shots that are finished at the very last minute. And so if you don't have a CGI dragon fighting in the forges, because you literally just haven't done that yet, you don't know how long it's going to be. You don't know whether you're talking about a 3-second shot, 5-second shot. So what you tend to do then is you must give yourself flexibility. And the best way to do that was to record the orchestra in sections.
What we would like to do is when we record this section, we're going to split it out, do it in layers. We're recording all those parts of this music separately so that as the picture changes, we'll be able to edit the music and manipulate the music and sort of rearrange it to work well with the new picture.
Yeah, so we could do the woodwinds first, please.
Woodwinds, you're up.
You know, you hear the orchestra playing together all the time, and you hear how good it sounds, and it's a fantastic sound. But then we suddenly started breaking the orchestra up, and then you realize that every individual section is phenomenal.
Percussion, thanks.
Horns, please.
The Forges was also obviously a climax, so you've got the full orchestra playing, and you've got, you know, it's got to be very, very exciting. And you know, you put all that together and it sounds exactly like what Howard wrote.
Thank you very much. You've all been amazing.
So thank you. Anderson, Peter Jackson.
Thank you.
No, I've just come to say that we thought we might want to do the whole score again, one instrument at a time.
No, yeah.
Hey, folks, just want to thank you very, very much. It's been fantastic. It's I've looked forward every day. I've looked forward to coming in here and sitting and hearing it all. It's just been terrific, and you've done us proud, honestly. Done New Zealand proud too. So congratulations, and thank you so much for all the incredible focus, and you've made our movie sound so incredibly good. Thank you.
There's got to be great pride from the orchestra to know that they played this score. They brought their own personalities. It's got a distinctive sound. I must say, I'm proud. If you think of film score as being, in a way, the emotional heart, because you can close your eyes, but you can never close your ears, even in the movies.
Here we go. Well, film is a very collaborative medium. It's really a team, a group. There's a lot of great artists who work on a film. Great engineers. The musicians that I've worked with in England, musicians we've worked with in Wellington that have contributed so enormously. And I always thought that to make good films, you have to have this really good sense of collaboration. You have to have this balance between the arts and all the different disciplines that are required to make a film.
Well, of course, everybody wants to know, how does it end? All I can tell you is we've started working earnestly on the third film.
And the third part is interesting because it's really the third of 6. So you're really writing a piece between 2 and 4, and that's an interesting place to be. So it's not really a closure, really. It's really an ending and a beginning.
I'm very much wanting it to be 6 movies that ultimately become a grand story that you can see from beginning to end. Music unites the film, and ultimately it's going to unite the entire 6 films as well.
And now I must take my pencil to paper and write a new score. Thank you all for listening.